Hi guys, remember how we started back in chapter 2 and Alice was down the rabbit hole and she had grown and she had shrunk and her last words were, "I'm so very tired of being all alone here." And if you forgot anybody to the story, the good part is instead of me reading it in class, you have it on video so you can go back and watch the other parts. But here we go in chapter 2, part 2. As she said this, she looked down at her hands and was surprised to see that she had put on one of the rabbit's little white kid gloves while she was talking. "How can I have done that?" she thought. "I must be growing small again." She got up and went to the table to measure herself by it, and found that as nearly as she could guess, she was now about 2 feet high and was going on shrinking rapidly. She soon found out that the cause of this was the fan she was holding, and she dropped it hastily, just in time to avoid shrinking away altogether. That was a narrow escape. Do you know what the words narrow escape means? Do you know what that means? Have you ever had a narrow escape, which is a close call, like you almost got out of it? What about other stories that have had narrow escapes? What about when Paddington barely got out of some of his predicaments? Or Pippi barely escaped the police chasing her? Or Around the World in 80 Days when they narrowly escape or have a narrow escape getting Princess Iuda out of her hiding place. What was Alice's narrow escape? Well, she was about to shrink into nothing. So now for the garden, and she ran with all her speed back to the little door. But alas, the little door was shut again, and little Golden Key was lying on the glass table as before. "Things are worse than ever," thought the poor child, "for I was never so small as this before, and I declare it's too bad that it is." And she said these words, her foot slipped in another moment, splash! She was up to her chin in salt water. Her first idea was that she had somewhat fallen into the sea. "And in that case, I can go back by railway," she said to herself. Alice had been to the seaside once in her life. Have you ever been to the seaside or to the ocean? And she had also come to the general conclusion that whenever you go to the English coast, you find some children digging in the sand with wooden spades. Then a row of lodging houses, and behind them in a railway station. However, she soon made out that she was in the pool of tears, which she had wept when she was 9 feet high. What was the pool made out of that she fell in? Remember, she had cried and cried when she was really, really tall, like we measured last week. And now she was in that pool, now that she was little. "I wished I hadn't cried so much," said Alice as she swarmed about trying to find her way out. "I shall be punished for it now, I suppose, by being drowned in her own tears. That will be a queer thing, to be sure. However, everything is queer today." Just then she heard something splashing about in the pool a little way off, and she swam nearer to make out what it was. At first she thought it must be a walrus or a hippopotamus, but then she remembered how small she was now, and she soon made out that they're only a mouse that had slipped in like herself. Would it be of any use now, thought Alice, to speak to this mouse? Everything is so out of the way down here that I should think very likely it can talk at any rate. There's no harm in trying, so she began. "Oh, mouse, do you know the way out of this pool?" "I'm very tired of swimming about here, oh mouse." Alice thought this must be the right way of speaking to a mouse. She had never done such a thing before, but she remembered having seen in her brother's Latin grammar book, "A mouse of a mouse to a mouse, so mouse." That sounds silly, doesn't it? You'll have to look when you get in 3rd grade and take Latin if your grammar book says something like that. The mouse looked at her rather inquisitively and seemed to her to wink one of its little eyes, but it said nothing. "Perhaps it doesn't understand English," thought Alice. "I dare say it's a French mouse, come over with William the Conqueror." For all of her knowledge of history, Alice had no very clear notion how long ago anything had happened. So she began again, "Où est ma chatte?" which was the first sentence in her French lesson book. The mouse gave a sudden leap out of the water and seemed to quiver all over with fright. Do you know what that means in French? "Where is my cat?" And remember, we've heard French in some of our other books. And remember, I told you I lived in France for a long time, and so I speak French. I quite forgot you didn't like cats. Not like cats, cried the mouse in a shrill, passionate voice. Would you like cats if you were me? Well, perhaps not, said Alice in a soothing tone. Don't be angry about it. And yet I wish I could show you our cat Dinah. I think you'd take fancy to cats if you could only see her. She's such a dear thing. Alice went on to herself as she swam lazily about in the pool, and she sits purringly so nicely by the fire, licking her paws and washing her face. She is such a nice, soft thing, and she's such a capital one for catching mice. Oh, I beg your pardon, cried Alice again, for this time the mouse was bristling all over. And she felt certain it must be really offended. We won't talk about her any more if you'd rather not. We indeed, cried the mouse, who was trembling down to the end of his tail. As if I could talk on such a subject. Our family always hated cats. Nasty, low, vulgar things. Don't let me hear that name again. I won't indeed, said Alice in a great hurry to change the subject of conversation. Are you fond of dogs? The mouse did not answer, so Alice went on eagerly. There is such a nice little dog near our house. I would like to show it to you. A little bright-eyed terrier, you know, with oh such long curly brown hair. And it'll fetch things when you throw them, and it'll sit up and beg for its dinner, and all sorts of things. I can't remember half of them, and it belongs to a farmer, you know, and he says it's so useful, it's worth 100 pounds. He says it kills all the rats. And, oh dear, cried Alice in a sorrowful tone, I'm afraid I've offended you. Again. So she's talking about the puppy and the tricks that it does. Do you guys have puppies? I know some of you do. I've met some of yours. We've talked about them. We talked about animals. But do they do any tricks? You know, our dogs, our little one, Nala, that you've met, likes to run and chase after a toy. But maybe you could use this time to treat your dog a new trick. For the mouse went swimming off again, away from her as hard as it could go, and making quite a commotion in the pool as it went. So she called softly after it, Mouse, dear, do come back again, and we won't talk about cats or dogs either if you don't like them. When the mouse heard this, it turned around and swam slowly back to her. Its face was quite pale, with passion, Alice thought, and it said in a low, trembling voice, Let us get to shore, and then I'll tell you my history, and you'll understand why it is I hate cats and dogs. It was high time, for the pool was getting quite crowded with the birds and animals that had fallen in there. There was a duck and a dodo, a lory and an eaglet, and several other curious creatures. Alice led the way, and the whole party swam to shore. So as we finished up chapter 2, we've learned that the rabbit was somewhat rude when he ran away. What do you think virtues that Alice has used? Has she been polite? Has she been kind? She's tried. She didn't mean to say things that would offend the mouse. Was the mouse polite, or did the mouse show anger? What are some of the characteristics that these animals or friends that fell into the pool show with Alice or other characters she's incorporated? And just as we've talked about our virtues all year, I want to see as if we read Alice, you find some of those virtues that Alice displays. So I'll look forward to reading the first part of chapter 3 with you live on our live stream, and we're going to have some fun activities to go with that. But until next time, I'll see you later. Bye.